Welcome back to Black News Tonight. About 6 weeks ago, the Republican members of the Texas State House were getting ready to pass a new voter suppression legislation. But in a historic move, the Texas Democrats literally escaped the state in 2 jet planes and since then have been camping out in D.C. Well, the age-old trick of breaking up the team was put to use. And yesterday, 3 Democrats crossed the proverbial picket line and returned to the House, rebuilding Quorum. Those 3 Democrats released a joint statement that their efforts to bring national attention to voter suppression was successful. And they said, quote, "Now we continue the fight on the House floor." They also cited COVID response efforts as the main reason for their return to the state. In response, Democratic Representative Ana Maria Ramos lashed out at her 3 colleagues for not informing the rest of the team about their plans as she tweeted, "Guess what the other deflecting Democrats have accomplished by going back? Nothing." She also released a statement criticizing what she considers to be GOP hypocrisy. As she said, these same Republican members demanding election integrity were the same members checking in for those that were not present during today's illegitimate quorum. Now we are one step closer to voter disenfranchisement. Joining me now to discuss how this happened and what this means for the coming days are BNC contributor Tezlyn Figaro and GOP strategist Melik Abdul. Melik, I'm going to start with you since, I think I know where you're going to go with this, and I want to hear you unpack this for the audience, and I want to hear Tezlyn do the same. How did they convince 3 representatives to return to the Texas State House?
Well, it was inevitable. At some point, Democrats were going to have to go back to Texas. So I don't think this is something that they would have been able to do indefinitely. Obviously, we know when it comes to political maneuvers like this, Republicans have done the same thing, and even Democrats now are doing that. But I think we should actually probably have a larger conversation about this whole idea of voter suppression. There were things actually in the bill that I think sometimes people are some people are purposely ignoring things that are in the bill, and then there are other people who simply just don't know what's in the bill. But there are things that are in the bill that aren't actually voter suppression. So whether that is, and I can't think of the young lady, unfortunately, I just had a brain freeze and I forgot her name. But there were things in the bill like increasing that, the early voting hours, that Sunday souls to the poll thing. Well, what Republicans did, actually, they increased the number of hours for that. And it was other things that they actually did in the bill that wasn't actually voter suppression. For instance, the 24-hour voting and the drive-through voting, these are things that, particularly in Harris County, were implemented in response to the pandemic, meaning that people who weren't out, because of the lack of in-person voting options, they implemented these things in response to that. What the Texas legislature did, they eliminated those things. So they eliminated 24-hour voting that were, again, implemented in response to the pandemic. But the conversation that we're having nationally is that those things, eliminating things that were done or done in response to the pandemic, those things means that it's voter suppression if you eliminate them. It's not actually voter suppression, and that's why I'm glad that we're on this show to talk about and distinguish those things that they're actually calling voter suppression to really just eliminating things that were implemented in response to the pandemic.
We got you. Tezlyn, what do you say to that?
Yeah, this is where my friend Melik and his GOP colleagues are confused, because guess what, Melik? We're still in a pandemic, and we will continue to be in a pandemic because the GOP refuses to implement laws, policies, administrative procedures to actually get folks vaccinated and to prevent the Delta virus. And Texas leads in that. In fact, Texas was one of the first states that actually returned to normal when it was not suggested. So I want to address a couple of points that he made. Number one, when he talked about extending the voting hours, yeah, they did extend the voting hours, but they only extended the early voting hours during a certain specific time. So they knew good and well what they were doing when they said, oh yeah, we'll extend it by 1 hour, but only if you go between this time and that time, which technically just pretty much makes the extending of the voting hours null and void. Secondly, when we talk about voter restriction, let's talk about it. When we talk about the 24-hour access, yes, it was for the pandemic, but there also was a huge increase in Harris County that went blue under the leadership of Mayor Sylvester Turner, who, by the way, is one of the only mayors in this country, one of the very few that actually did implement policies after the George Floyd justice and the George Floyd matter. I just want to kind of put that out there. When you talk about drive-through voting, that was also something that increased turnout among people of color. When we talk about the ability to intimidate folks by allowing partisan poll watchers, this is something as well that was a part of this new bill that was now passed. And they added criminal penalties for elected officials to send out just asking people to request their ballot. So there are several things in this bill that contributes to voter suppression. But the bottom line is these three Democrats, they folded, they caved, they sold out faster than Jordans on Christmas Day. They have completely betrayed their caucus and their colleagues by at least not giving them the heads up that they planned on going back. And they did, Melik, did plan to be there indefinitely. In fact, that was one of the quotes. We plan to stay indefinitely until this session is over, until we get voting rights passed.
Faster than Jordans on Christmas Day. Melik, what do you say to that? Was this just a case of selling out? And also, what do you make of Tezlyn's analysis of what the legislation actually said?
Well, again, I don't think that we should in any way, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, we shouldn't endorse state legislatures remaining out of their own state indefinitely. I wouldn't support that if it were just Republicans doing it, or in this case, Democrats doing it. Again, there are things that they actually did to change the law. For instance, the young lady whose name I remember, I'm sure we all remember Crystal Mason. Crystal Mason was the black woman who ended up in jail because she voted and didn't realize that she wasn't able to vote because she was under supervision. She was a former felon. Well, what the Texas legislature did, they actually called it the Crystal Mason provision, where they said that a judge has to tell a voter if they will not be able to vote in an election. So there are things like that they did. You know, the 24-hour voting, that 24-hour voting, that was only in Harris County, and it was only at certain precincts. That isn't something that was statewide. Even the drive-through voting, I think that was actually on one day. It wasn't something that was just a part of the entire early voting system. It literally was on one day, and again, in Harris County, not the entire state. So I think we need to actually add that context.
Let me let Tezlyn jump in there.
Yeah, well, Harris County.
Okay, context fair. Tezlyn, jump in.
Yeah, Harris County, just in case you're not familiar, Houston is Harris County. That's the fourth largest city in the country, one of the largest cities that have voters of color. And if it is just one day and just one drive-through, then why not leave it? Why take the time to craft legislation to carve out, let's just be clear, black folks in just that one county? So it's certainly not just one county. And let's also talk about the fact that they are including surveillance cameras, the fact that they are including restriction from those that need assistance. Oh, there's quite a bit of voter suppression, and I noticed you didn't respond to all of the other things that I gave you on your talking points as well. So there's plenty of voter suppression. There's also voter depression. I'm an independent, so I can be fair. Voter depression comes from Democrats, and particularly President Biden, who is not stepping in, and Congress stepping in by passing on the federal level, the John Lewis Voting Act. So there's a couple of things. Republicans and Democrats are working hand in hand with voter suppression and voter depression. But let's be clear about the facts when we talk about this bill. We can pick and choose the things that you want to pick out that says that they did right, but let's talk about the things that they did wrong. And just saying Harris County being the fourth largest city in the country, certainly just no small, just a couple of voters or so.
I only got a minute left between the two of y'all, so I need y'all to really move quick on this. But ultimately, was this a battle of wills that the Democrats lost? Or did they win by the attention that they drew to this voter suppression issue over 38 days? I mean, Democrats are claiming victory on this.
We really can't say that.
You go first. I'll give Tezlyn the last word.
Yeah, well, we really can't say that they've been victorious because there is no voter bill here in Washington. And the only thing that they're doing, they're just refusing to show up for their own job. So I won't say the Democrats are actually winning, but just to clarify, I actually have family members who are watching in Harris County right now. Why? Because I'm from Mississippi and I vacation in summers in Houston. So I know Houston very well, just if there's any confusion about my knowledge of Harris County.
Well, just to
Tezlyn?
help make sure you're not confused. I actually have a house in Harris County. I was just there in Houston on yesterday. I work for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, so I too am familiar with Harris County and voted in Harris County through the drive-through voting, just in case there's any confusion about that. And let me go ahead and answer Mark's question. No, it was not a win. This is where we can agree, Malik. It was not a win because nothing was actually accomplished. Meaning, the Voting Rights Act was not passed. We don't need attention, Mark. We need actual results. And so there's a march that will be happening again on next weekend in Washington, not Harris County, fighting for the voting rights for all of us, and so that we can all win. And let's be clear, their job, Malik, is to represent their constituents, and their constituents want access to the polls.
Well, I got 3 houses in Harris County and a Scarface album, so can't none of y'all tell me about Texas. Tezlyn, Malik, thank you so much for joining me. There you go. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the spirited debate. Everybody stay with us. We want you to join the conversation too. Head over to our BNC Instagram and Twitter pages. Let us know how you feel. You can also visit our website, bnc.tv, and you can subscribe to the YouTube page to check out clips from the show.